Can you hear me now? Good morning, everyone. As Michelle said, my name is Ellen Kohler. I am the director of psychotherapy with a company called Caring People, but I am at heart and essence and at soul a social worker. So I am so thrilled to be here with you today and connect again with COIL. Michelle actually took most of my introduction, which is lovely, less work for me. COIL, again, is Conversations of Your Life, and we are going to be spending some time. We're going to have a conversation, and sometimes these are difficult conversations to initiate with our loved ones and with our healthcare providers, but difficult as they are necessary ones to ensure that your voice is heard should you be unable to speak for yourself, to advocate for yourself. 80% per a study in 2019 of people indicate that they are aware of advanced care planning. However, 66% or so cite obstacles to actually execute these documents. Number one being that they don't believe that their wishes will be followed. And number two being that they assume that their proxy, which we're going to hear a little bit more about in a few minutes, will know. They'll just know my wishes and what I want. And that's a very big assumption to make. I see some head shaking. So we're going to be talking about planning. I don't know about you all, but planning can help decrease anxiety. I know it did for me in terms of, let me prepare material, let me plan what I'm going to wear, let me plan my route so I'm here on time and my anxiety came down. What a more significant thing to decrease our anxiety about than our end-of-life wishes. So that is why we are here today, to educate you, residents of New Jersey. And I don't know about you, but I think it is the most New Jersey thing to make sure that our voices are heard, because we are loud and proud in everything. Why not this? And this is definitely a part of aging. I dipped, right? Oh, I'm back. This is going to be fun. So here in front of you, you have a panel of experts within multidisciplinary fields. We are waiting on one. She will slip in and add to our expertise here. And we're going to be hearing about advanced directives, advanced care planning in several different spheres: spiritual, emotional, financial, legal, because these things don't operate in a vacuum. They inform and influence each other in our decision making. As questions come up, I'd love this to be as close to an open conversation as we can. If questions come up, raise your hand. We're going to have microphones floating around the audience, and we can answer those questions. And of course, there'll be a time at the end as well. So I am going to have our panelists introduce themselves. Rabbi?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rabbi Julie Roth, and I'm the rabbi at Shomrei Emunah, which is a conservative synagogue on Park Street, not far from the YMCA. And I'm in my third year of living in Montclair. It's really a pleasure to be here today and to be in this beautiful space with all of you. I spent the first 17 years of my career as the rabbi of Princeton University in Princeton, New Jersey. So during those years, I didn't deal with end of life that often. Of course, I interacted with faculty on these issues, and occasionally we would see a tragic student death. But in general, one of the reasons I wanted to make the switch to being a congregational rabbi was because being involved with families when a loved one is facing a critical illness or dying, or officiating in a funeral, is among the most meaningful work that a pastor can do. And I just want to mention, by way of my introduction, that during my training, I studied chaplaincy both at the Harlem Community Hospital, where I visited more than 600 patients in one summer and dealt with people who came from very different religious and cultural backgrounds than I did in dealing with end-of-life issues. And I also served as a chaplain in the Riverdale Jewish Home for the Aging. So I bring all of those experiences to the conversation today.
That's why you look familiar, from Jewish Home of Aging. Hi, everybody. I'm Shanna Siegel, and I am an elder law attorney here in Montclair. I have my office in Montclair as well as a second office in Bridgewater, and I am a veteran of this Conversations of Your Life program. I've done it a number of times in the area. And that's because it is something that I'm very, very passionate about. I think that in terms of estate planning, that doing your advanced care planning is one of the most important and empowering pieces. And to me, we're not so much talking about death, is how we want the end of our lives to be and what we want that experience to be like for us. So that's the perspective that I bring to that, and hopefully I can answer your questions and most importantly encourage you all to take steps to do this. Thanks.
And again, I'm Ellen Kohler. I am a licensed clinical social worker. My job is as the director of psychotherapy for Caring People. We are in 6 states. We provide in-home care from round the clock to shifts, skilled nursing, care management, and my favorite, what I oversee, which is behavioral health. We have licensed social workers, licensed clinical social workers who provide behavioral health services primarily to the older population. We do that in independent and assisted living facilities. We do that via telehealth. We are still doing in-home staffing allowable, and also in our office down in Monmouth County. But before that, for a couple of decades, I was a home care and hospice social worker right here in Essex County through the RWJ Barnabas system, and actually had the pleasure of participating in the first cohort, the National Association of Social Workers New Jersey. They have a certificate on advanced care planning, and that came to be a few years ago, and I was lucky enough to be in that first class, overseen by Dr. Marion Holler, who is a fantastic end-of-life geriatrician, wonderful soul. So I'm so pleased to be here with you all, because even though I've left, say, hospice and home care per se, I'm still very dedicated. I'm not done. I'm not done with hospice yet. And I have a real passion and dedication to ensuring that our older Americans also have their behavioral health care needs met. There's a lot of ageism and barriers to that. So happy to be here with you today. So several of us have used the word aging, so I want to ask the panelists here what they think healthy aging means to them and how their specific discipline and services, expertise, how they can provide and contribute to the concept of healthy aging. So, Rabbi?
Well, we start aging from the moment we're born, right? So I work with people across the lifespan, and I think that living and healthy aging have in common maintaining community and connections, living life with purpose and meaning, and that purpose and meaning might change as you go, and also treating this sacred vessel called our body, which keeps us alive, and for some of us, we think of it as holding our soul or our spirit in as healthy as it can be, because it serves us. And I think that when we speak about healing in the Jewish tradition, we speak about healing both of body and spirit, and I think there's an opportunity to age well, not only in your body, but also in your spirit, even when your body is giving you a very difficult time.
Well, I certainly agree with everything that Rabbi said, but in terms of thinking from a legal and a kind of practical psychosocial perspective, one of the things that I work with clients on is planning, and that can be everything from the practical issues that surround an individual who is aging, particularly someone who is aging maybe not with as much support. So we have in the Montclair community a lot of solo seniors, and there are a lot of barriers to healthy aging. So one of the things that I help people try to do is really think about all of the issues that are going to confront all of us as we age, and how we can plan for them and how we can put things in place to make that an easier journey. So in terms of, are there care managers who can fill in and help us? Are there, the people who we love who are going to be making healthcare decisions for us if we ever can't? How can we empower them and make sure they understand what we want? And everything in between. Where are we going to reside if there comes a point that we need care? So those are all parts of healthy aging that people need to be thinking of, and that I can help clients kind of get there.
Thank you both. what can I say that hasn't been said already? When I thought about this question, acceptance, and sometimes radical acceptance of aging, including accepting some of the artifacts of aging, the readers, the AARP membership card right here, aids that we need perhaps for mobility, but that acceptance, and as a therapist working with clients as they're going through the aging process, one of my 87-year-old clients says, I'm not getting old, I'm old. And but what we spend time on in session is not only acceptance, we do a lot of reflection, but also strategies for managing some of the anxieties that come along, those fears that come along for himself, for his spouse, when there is a medical setback, a well-managed one, but we can often spiral in our thinking. This is just the first step, and I'm going from independence and driving my car and doing the things that make my life meaningful to not being able to do those things. So we spend a lot of time on that, and I love that meaning and purpose came up, because sometimes we need to redefine what that is. So thank you both for your views on healthy aging. Let's go into what are advanced directives. Who would like to jump in there? I'm looking at you.
Yes, it kind of makes sense that I would. So, a lot of times people come to me and they'll say, they'll throw out one of the varied terms, whether we're talking about a healthcare power of attorney or a living will or an advance directive, an instruction directive. Whatever you call them, they're really documents that fall into two categories, and sometimes they're together and sometimes they're separate. So the first issue is, who do we want to make healthcare decisions if there comes a point where we can't make them ourselves? And so you would be nominating someone, either your healthcare proxy, or you'll also hear it referred to as your healthcare power of attorney, who will make a decision only if you can't share what your wishes are, or you're not able to understand and have a reasoned conversation with your physician about what your healthcare wishes are. So that's the first person. That's the first issue, who. And then the second is what? What do I want? And so, again, that may be an instruction directive, it may be a living will, it may be part of, just a document that someone has called an advance directive, but you are providing some insight to the person who is going to be making the decisions as to what your wishes are. And so I think that's all really important. I do want to touch on one other document, because I find that many times people aren't familiar with this, which is a POLST, Practitioner Order on Life-Sustaining Treatment. That is a practitioner's order on life-sustaining treatment, POLST. And this is a medical order. You do it with your physician. And it can be really important for the purposes of making sure that your wishes are followed. So we can come back around to that, but just something to know that you would do that with your physician.
And I believe we had a question back there.
Are we going to get notes? I'm trying to take notes, but I'm not doing a very good job. Will we get any?
I know I don't have handouts.
For those of you that are worried about taking notes, this is being filmed, and we'll have probably a link, right, on our YouTube channel? So you can go to the YouTube channel, and you can take notes while you're watching it, and you can watch it, stop it, take notes, watch it, stop. So don't worry, just listen. We'll take care of that part for you, okay?
And I'm actually glad that came up. That came up earlier, so that is definitely a note to take away for the next time. Thank you.
I just want to add to that by saying that I think in a secular framework, advanced directives are about determining what you want. And I think for some religious frameworks, there are parameters of what is and is not acceptable in terms of choices that you make at the end of your life. I am very familiar with those perspectives within Judaism in terms of the difference between removing an impediment to your death or hastening death, which can come up with issues like morphine doses, which at a certain point actually can lead to not only lessening pain, but making it more difficult to breathe. And so if you are religious and you don't know what the parameters are within your religion, I really encourage you to speak to your religious leaders about it. And I also wanted to say that, and I'm sure we'll get to this, that funeral planning is an additional step that I think you don't typically do with a lawyer, although you might make arrangements to prepay for whatever plans you make. But deciding how you want the ceremonial end of your life to happen, and taking care of some of the practical things like making sure that you've decided if you'll be buried or you'll be cremated, and if you're buried, that you have a grave, etc., are also important parts of end-of-life planning.
Which I'm so glad you brought that up, Rabbi, because I actually did not have funeral planning in any of the spheres that we're going to speak about today. So is there more that you wanted to say about that, or Shanna?
I just want to add one thing about, because thank you, funeral planning is very, very important. And one thing that there is a legal barrier that sometimes people will run into, so I just wanted to address, is if you don't have any immediate next of kin, or that is not who you want to be making funeral arrangements for you, you need to designate a funeral agent. And you can do so in your will or in a document. And that's really, really important. I've seen times where bodies couldn't be released because it wasn't clear who the next of kin is. So that'd just be really important.
Can I just say, you can also prepay. With my mother-in-law, my husband, I knew what she wanted, but I have a brother-in-law who said, she's too old, she doesn't have any friends left. And they were shocked when there were 90 people at the wake. But it was prepaid, so they didn't have an argument.
Just to ensure that the group heard about the option to prepay funeral arrangements. And this is often something, diving into the social work sphere during my time in hospice, that the social workers would help. They were part of the team with the medical director, the nurse manager, the home health aide, chaplain, sometimes some ancillary therapies, which we could talk a little bit about later, things like music and pet therapy, but the social worker would be the one tasked with addressing that with the family, what their wishes were. I remember being on call, it was December 23rd, this was pre-2017, and one of our patients passed, and there were no funeral arrangements made. There were also limited funds. So I think I still probably have the note somewhere of about 15 phone calls within a 45-minute period between family members and different facilities who would work to facilitate addressing this person's remains and what was respectful and compassionate, what the family wanted, and it hadn't been done before. So this is often something that the social workers will address to avoid that crisis decision making, and certainly addressing prepaid funerals is another very good option for that. Yes, please, let's continue this.
So I'll just say a few words about funeral planning. I feel very strongly that one of the greatest gifts you can give to the loved ones that you leave behind is at least a sketch of what you want in your funeral. It's very difficult to make these decisions while you're actively in grief, and there are, whatever your secular religious backgrounds, many different decisions to be made. The first one is, of course, what will happen with your body after you die. Will you be buried? Will you be cremated? If you'll be buried, where will you be buried? If you have preferences about how your grave might be marked, or who you'll be buried next to. These are all very important decisions not to leave to others. If you'll be cremated, maybe you want to learn more about cremation, or where, what your wishes are for how your cremation remains will be buried or scattered or held, in someone's home. Like these are very fundamental decisions. But then there's a question of, if you're going to have a funeral or a memorial service, who will officiate? If you're affiliated with a church or a synagogue or a mosque, you can meet with your religious leader ahead of time and educate yourself about what the options are within that ceremony in terms of music or liturgy that might be recited. You might have strong feelings about who might eulogize you at your funeral. You might feel that you really don't want to impose that responsibility on anybody in the family, or you might feel like whoever wants to can do it. You might be like my mother. You want to make sure that even though my mother's still alive, and may she live to be 120, but she's always been really great about hospitality on the holidays, but she's made it very clear she does not want cooking for others to be one of the main themes of her eulogy, So maybe you have feelings about that. I think it's not something people typically do before they die, but if you were going to have an anniversary celebration, or your kids are having a wedding, or whatever it might be, you make a guest list, right? I mean, to assume that the people who your loved ones leave behind know who are the people in your family or in your circle of friends or community or the organizations that should be notified after you've died. I mean, they may have no idea. It would be kind to actually make a list, even better, a list with contact information. And then there are the details of, are you going to be buried in a casket? Do you have any preferences about the casket? And of course, it costs real money to make arrangements after you die, and if you have the financial capacity to prepay or to set some money aside for that purpose, that also can relieve the burden on those who are left behind.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you choose to be cremated, are there funeral homes with religious affiliations that will not cremate you?
The question.
As opposed to, having a regular burial.
The question is related to cremation, and would there be resistance from certain funeral homes due to religious considerations?
I can only speak to this from the Jewish perspective. Cremation is traditionally not allowed in the Jewish community, although more and more Jews are opting for cremation. And so if you're looking to be cremated and you're Jewish, you would definitely want to check. And I don't know in other religions. I don't know if someone else knows.
Adrian? Oh, we have from the audience.
For Christian, my ex-husband was Christian, and when he passed away, he detailed what he wanted, and he wanted to be cremated, and we had a celebration of life, and then he also made a list and chose the restaurant where he wanted to have the repast. Yes, you did.
So there was no resistance, clearly, from that particular funeral home. And this is, again, why, as part of the comprehensive biopsychosocial assessment that a social worker will do, and it just doesn't have to be within the hospice context, they will certainly address spiritual and religious beliefs, not only for how it informs the person as they're living and making decisions and what values are important to them, but in situations such as we're discussing right now. And I wanted to swear for one moment, this topic is so popular and so exciting that our panel has grown. So I wanted Adrienne to introduce herself. Adrienne?
Yeah. Good morning, all. I assume it's still morning. I'm Adrienne Alate, and I am an end-of-life doula. Excuse me. I am an end-of-life doula. Before I get into who I am, I just need to say that I gave myself 2 hours to get here. 2 hours, and so anything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and so I apologize for that. I had to say that this is a beautiful space. I would not have not shown up because my mother was raised across the street, and so this is really, really an amazing event for me. And so I have deep roots in Montclair, and so I am honored to be here. Sure. Sorry for the feedback. I told you anything that could have gone wrong today. Definitely, and I even left my door open. The woman had to call me back. And so, again, I'm an end-of-life doula. I bring spiritual, emotional, and mental and support to people who have an advanced stage illness. I do have to say that I stand out from other doulas because what I've noticed is that similar to similar to a birthing doula, I provide that support, and sometimes it's practical support. And so I hear some practical things that are being shared, and so I'll ask questions. What are you going to do with those social media accounts? Do you want your adult children to wash you? Do you want to be taken out once you've taken your last breath? Do you want to be taken out where the neighbors are peeking out of the window? And most people will say, no, I don't want Mrs. Such and Such to watch me. But some communities, and so they'll choose to go out at night when no one's peeking out of the window. But some communities are really tight-knit. And so we can create a ritual around, maybe little bells or bubbles or whatever, because we all know when someone is no longer there. We all know whether it's a nursing home or a dialysis where people have met 3 times a week, and HIPAA laws say that the team, the professionals can't announce that. And so again, there are so many emotional, mental, and spiritual needs as we age. And so one of the things, getting back on how I stand out, is I've noticed that I come alongside people not just when there's an advanced stage illness, but when there's a decline in a life that they cannot live. And so what does that look like? It looks like me sprinkling those into life ideas, thoughts, empowering them. So guess what? At the last moment, they don't need me. And so the first time it happened, I said, wait a minute. I'm the end-of-life doula. Why are you not calling me? And then I realized that it is a blessing, even though I am spiritual and sacred, and I honor what all people's wishes are, which is why we're here today, talking about your wishes. And I assume the legal concepts. Don't give me the microphone, I apologize. I am making up for missed time. And so even though, there are the legal parts, which I know you all have spoken about, there are also the spiritual, emotional, and practical things that you have to think about as well. And so creating that space, also when you are in that active dying phase and you're not able to make those decisions, I'm quite sure that was discussed as well prior to me entering the room. But, do you want the candles? Do you want your grandchildren playing choo-choo trains around your bed? There are a lot of things to consider, and especially, and I don't know if this came up, but I just feel the need to say that again, just making up for missed time. There is a tool that's out there, and I started following an organization called Okay, I told you, anything that could go wrong? Compassion Choices. And they spent a lot of time, money, and working with politicians to create a tool for those who have dementia. So you can decide at what point in that process, the disease process of dementia, that you want certain things to happen at each stage. And so that's something that I am always proud to share. And I think that, I guess if my neighbor here would tap me, she probably would. And so have I introduced myself?
I think that's
Yeah, thank you.
very well, very well. You want to? Oh, your name?
Yeah.
Adrian.
What do you do? What is your profession?
Yeah, and so I am, this is what I found, that people don't necessarily, just like I heard some whispers on doula, people don't necessarily care what your profession is. What they care is what problems can you solve for them. And so you can call me a rabbit, you can call me an elephant, you can call me a doula, you can call me a companion, you can call me a supporter, you can call me whatever you want. But the problems that I solve are, so I've actually created what's called a lot of work, a lot of tears, a lot of sweat, a Four Seasons framework. And so I come alongside of people. I ensure first that they're safe and that they're really living the best quality of life. And so how do I do that? I create an individual care plan. I look at who you were, who are you now, and who would you like to be with the proper support. And so I tell people that sometimes you can find me in a four-star restaurant having a really engaging conversation. One of the ones that I'll say that sometimes we forget to talk about, and this is not a political statement, but I can tell you that people can go on for hours talking about what were their thoughts of all the first ladies that have sat in the White House. And so, you know, you'll hear such and such was dressed really well, such and such did this. And so I don't know if I answered your question because I sometimes go into a tangent. And so it's making sure that people are safe, that they're having those conversations, looking at the resources. You know, does an attorney need to be involved to come along and you know, support them legally? One of the things, I don't know, that came up that I found right away working with Shanna is that how many times have we been told that assisted livings, you know, 2 years, you can go on Medicaid. I've heard that so many times. Yeah, they'll tell you that. But if you don't have an attorney reading that contract, you may find that that's not the case, especially since there's so much turnover in those living arrangements. Also, the other thing I found over the years, and this is huge, and I can say that for today, I'm not sure I can say it for tomorrow, with the political climate that we're living in, not good or bad, but just the reality, is that you don't have to be dirt poor to find some financial resources. And so again, you can call me rabbit, elephant, doula, companion, or friend. What I do is come alongside and assess. One of the things that Shannon and I are also realizing, as well as the ladies on the table here with me, how many of us, I'm going to ask 3 questions and I'm going to give the mic back, unless there's another question. How many of us are solo agers? That means that you don't know who is going to make those decisions, who's going to stand by your side. And so another thing that I've learned to really take a hold to was to think about how can we support those? Because what happened in America, and I don't know when because I'm not that old, that our children went away to college and they didn't come back. They want to be back, but they have lives there. How many of us are caregivers? That means that we're caring for someone right now. Okay. And so bringing in those supports. Now, I am going to ask this question. Usually no one raises their hand. How many of us are receiving care today? In-home care. I told you. People don't raise their hand even when they are, but because you all are in this beautiful space, I'm going to believe you today. And so, did I answer your question, sir? Yeah. No. If you go to the Compassion Choices website, you'll see what's called a dementia tool. And I don't know the name of it, but it's amazing. Because we know that dementia is really, running rampant, and I can give you my reasons for that, but I'm not a doctor, so I won't. Yes?
How does one get in touch with you? Do you offer service individually, or how does one get in touch with you to benefit from your management of health and service? How?
Yeah.
For all of you.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'll say is, and it definitely is not about me, we're in a really, this is an important date, talking about our wishes. And so today is not about myself, but individually, can you imagine someone sitting at your feet, listening to your individual story, your individual regrets, your individual wishes, both legally, and what's the opposite of legally? Non-legal? Non-legal. So what I like to think is that individually, you would, cater from not just my support, but probably, all of us here. But there are times where you all are sitting so close together, and I like that pink shirt, so I'm gonna pick on you. Do you know each other?
Yes.
Yeah. So what if,
Both of us are grandmothers to the same kid.
wow, great. I'm going to ask one more question, but I'm going to answer this. And so and I'm pretty sure that in different capacities, our panelists here work with groups of people. But imagine if you don't know each other, but you have similarities. I might bring you together. So can I tell you a joke? So sometimes I go out and maybe I'm sitting. The last time was at a Somerset game, the baseball game, and both my clients have dementia, and they're forgetting, and I could cry. And one is saying to the other, "Don't worry, it's okay." And the other one's saying to the other when they forget, "Don't worry, it's okay." And I'm in the, next to them, cracking up in my head. But it's like, that's the magic of the moment. And so, again, it's absolutely not about me. This is such a sacred day. Events, I don't know the proper word, but you all can read, you probably already shared that. And so I'm going to hand the mic, because I don't know if I answered the question or not, but
We had a couple of hands. Sir, did you have one? Did I get you chewing? And then, ma'am. Take a sip.
He wants to know how to make sure your partner isn't going to change your plans if if you're no longer alive.
So I'm going to address that from the healthcare, because we're here to talk about healthcare today. I mean, there's many other issues if we're talking about financial, but from the healthcare perspective, when I mentioned before about different healthcare documents, sometimes it makes sense to do the document as one document, and sometimes it makes sense to do it as two, and what you mentioned can play into that. So if you feel that you want to make very sure that whoever is making decisions is following what your wishes are, then it will make sense to have one document that is going to be looked at by the healthcare providers, and it should deal with both your proxy as well as your instruction wishes, because your healthcare proxy is bound to follow what written wishes you have put there. And I have actually had cases where there was a dispute between different family members. They had different opinions about whether or not the person who was designated as healthcare proxy was following what was written there. And in a particular instance, they were doing exactly the opposite of what was written there. And there was actually a guardianship action which was brought, which involved enforcing those rights. So those wishes. So that is one piece. And the other way to deal with that would be to have those conversations with your doctor and to put them into a post, because again, that's a medical order. Now, that order can potentially be changed by your healthcare representative, but it would be a difficult thing they would have to explain to the doctor, why are you now saying something that's completely different from what he said when he was, when he did that post. So I think a lot of times it's more about really having a thorough communication as to why these are the wishes you want. I have had situations where because there were such difficult family scenarios, we did put some of those wishes also within a trust because we kind of tied it to the funds. That, I wanted to remain at home and I wanted it to be clear that I remained at home and that the trustee was told that and was given the funds to do that. So there's a number of ways that you can do it legally, but you also want to make sure that you're not, you can't always anticipate every single scenario. So you want to build some flexibility in because you can't, you're not going to list all, of the thousands of things that could potentially happen. All right?
As a rabbi, I find it very common that when somebody is critically ill, but not necessarily actively dying yet, that not all the family members are on the same page. And that's, I think, more of a emotional, religious, moral problem than a legal problem. It's like, that moment where maybe the patient himself knows that there's no more fight. I had a congregant who died of cancer this season, and he had, fought and made it to 2 more kids' weddings and seen another grandchild born, and just didn't want to try any more experimental treatment and wanted to go to hospice, and was very clear about that, and was very clear that his children and his wife were not ready. And so the role of the chaplain, and perhaps also of a death doula in that kind of situation, is to facilitate a conversation and to really help people express what is hard for them to express, and to help them hear what is hard for them to hear. And so sometimes it's a process of a day or 2 a week for family members or for the patient to come along if there's a gap in terms of decisions about accepting the transition from fighting illness to dying peacefully without pain. The legal documents don't necessarily mandate how quickly you move from here to there. And if there's conflict in the family or just internal struggle of letting go, that's really where a social worker, a clergy member, or I assume an end-of-life doula can be helpful.
Thank you. I see a hand and then a hand. I'm probably going to throw this over to Shanna, but in 2018, the medical aid in dying legislation went into effect. Am I right?
That's correct. So we have the medical aid in dying legislation, and it does allow a competent individual to make the choice to control the end of their life in certain situations. It does need to be done by a competent individual. They do need to ask a number of times. There's a whole sort of process to go through with it. And they have to be able to self-administer the medication, which can be very important and can be, kind of a stumbling point for some individuals. I work very closely with the ALS organization to assist people who have that complication because they may not have the strength. So yes, that is can be a really important.
I'm just going to ask a follow-up question because it's been a few years since I studied that legislation. Is it still the case that you have to have a terminal degenerative illness and that Alzheimer's is not considered the type of illness for which you can end your life?
Alzheimer's can be the diagnosis, but it does have to be, you do have to meet the criteria of being terminal, so that is not always clear with Alzheimer's. The problem with Alzheimer's is that you lose competency. So generally, you're not able to satisfy both the competency and the terminal. Yes, that is correct.
One of the other things that I wanted to share is that there's something called voluntary stopping eating and drinking, and it's not as painful as it may sound. After a certain amount of time, depending on, your biological factors, you may desire it not to eat or drink, like within, for lack of a better time frame, about 24 hours. And so that is an option. One of the things I tell families is that you should probably have hospice there supporting you, whereas with the voluntary maid that Janet spoke about, you may not have a hospice that would support you, that would be by your side. So you would be really aware of what type of physician and what support system you have in place. The other thing I wanted to say is that someone asked a question about how do you ensure? And so it is about building the relationships. And so, the professional relationships, I heard doula, but also care manager, someone that knows you, that follows you through those seasons of aging, or an attorney, build those relationships before you need them.
Thank you, Adrian. Question right here. Excellent question.
So you are only supposed to have one person. I very strongly recommend against naming multiple individuals. I have my clients do it all the time, though, because they have 2 children and they do not want to choose one. So what I will generally recommend is that you state in the document that you want this person to be the healthcare proxy for the purposes of communicating and signing consent, but that it is your wish that they discuss it and come to a decision with the rest of the family. But if there is conflict between them on, generally or specifically with regard to healthcare issues, maybe one is very religious and one isn't, or something like that, you really need to address that up front.
Thank you for that. Another question?
I know that you can certainly do that, and I just don't have it with me. I generally, when I do a PowerPoint, I provide it. But what we can do is when they send out the link, we can provide you with a few links. We can all kind of get together some links that would be helpful.
One of the things I will share is that if you go to the New Jersey's Department of Health website, you'll find 2 templates. Yeah.
You're right, that's where.
So the Department of Health's website, you'll find the 2 templates.
2 questions.
Yeah. So it's called a POLST, P-O-L-S-T, Practitioner's Order on Life-Sustaining Treatment. You can also get it online. And if you get it from your doctor or from your hospital, it's a green page. And the nice thing about it is that it's a medical order and it follows you where you go. So if you were you're living at home and then you go into an assisted living, or you're in your assisted living and you were admitted to the hospital, you can bring that with you. And it's a medical order so it doesn't have to go to the legal department to be analyzed before it will be followed. So in that sense, it can be very helpful, and it can include a DNR order, it can include a do not hospitalize, a do not intubate, a variety of different things that you can include in that, and it's signed with your physician.
But I still don't understand how that interferes with your other documentation, like your living will and all the directives, giving details.
That's a good question. So for most of the people in this room, we are not at a stage of life where we are making a decision about not being a DNR, being a do not hospitalize. We do not have a terminal condition. And POLST is really meant for that population. It can be used more broadly. So somebody who has not a terminal illness, but a very serious chronic illness, or is, extremely fragile, may choose to address the issues with a POLST. But the idea of a POLST is that given where you are in your health, okay, that you do have a very serious health condition, that you're talking about what things you would want, okay? Whereas a healthcare proxy and instruction directive and the other pieces that we've talked about are more global. So we're all doing those because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, all right? So you may have both. Some people are going to have both, but most of us are not going to have a POLST at this point because a doctor is not going to engage in a conversation with you about what you want if you have cancer, if you don't have cancer, right? It's much more tailored to the particular situation that you might be in. But I will say that if you do you are in a situation where a POLST would be appropriate, and I think that's a conversation to have with your doctor about whether it's appropriate. It is a much more powerful tool than a healthcare proxy because it's going to be followed in a way that a healthcare instruction directive isn't without it first going to legal and all those other steps.
Okay, my other question is really quick. When you are cremated, can the ashes be moved from one state to another?
Nah, legally, not really.
Take my ashes back to Denmark.
I do not know the answer to that, but I'm going to say that you probably legally couldn't, but I'm not sure who would know.
I'm not sure who's monitoring that, so it's a good question. Did you have something?
Yeah, one of the things I just wanted to say is that once you get these forms, make copies, take them with you, because as much as we live in a technology world, sometimes they don't follow you, especially a post form. And so make copies, when you show up, deliver it, have the conversations with your doctors, but also take them with you. The other thing I just want to turn to Shanna and ask, because I'm not familiar with this topic, but I think it's worth bringing up. As far as DNRs are concerned, and please correct me, it's my understanding that if you receive a DNR in the hospital, that DNR does not follow you home. And so it's my understanding, and please follow up on this, that a hospital DNR doesn't follow you home. And so you want the type of DNR that not only is valid in the hospital, not only valid in the transportation home, but also in your home, or if you get home and then go to another facility, you want to make sure. And so did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think that would be a situation where you would want to do a POLST, so you would have it respected in any situation.
Hold on, we have a question in the back.
DNR is do not resuscitate, and some of the more recent language is allow natural death, because don't forget, if you are in a state of needing resuscitation, your heart has stopped. So again, they've been introducing this allow natural death language.
Well, do me a favor, just raise your hand if you have a question. I'm going to take this one in the back and keep your hand raised.
Yeah, the POLST would be the way to deal with that, and that's really what it is. It becomes a part of your medical record. Yeah.
You have a question, Dave?
I have a friend. The woman came back from her last chemo. She's clear of cancer already. Her husband, I think, was starting with Parkinson's. He was eating a sandwich when she came home. He choked on the sandwich. We weren't worried about him. The ambulance came and asked her, does he have a DNR? Now, I'm not walking around with a DNR. She didn't know he had his past. But my thought was, carry it as a car? Do you have
Like
it
a
on
picture
your
jump.
phone?
Right, right.
Do you hide it in a safe place in my house and I'll never find it in a house?
Years and years of DNRs on the refrigerator. That's my only.
There used to have we used to have a program called the Vial of Life, and it was something like your town would have. I don't know. We had something you put in your freezer. There was also a Vial of Life that you could put on your intermagnetic refrigerator magnet with a paperwork holder, and that anybody coming in an ambulance could see it. But I don't know if that's applicable.
We 100% on the refrigerator, all of the things they said. We also offer a card that goes in a wallet where you can access the documents as well. So, a lot of different ways out there to do that. Yeah.
So we're speaking a lot about the what, the documents, the who, the proxy, or a power of attorney. I'm wondering if in our last few minutes we can dip a little bit into the how, because while this group is wonderfully communicative and open and sharing stories and asking questions, when it's at a different level with our loved ones, our adult children, partners, whatever the constellation is, these are discussions that we can struggle with. So I'd like to ask the panel, and I'm guessing there's a few folks in the audience who might share as well, about ways that you have approached this topic regarding advanced care planning, perhaps a little bit of scripting that you have found has worked or been helpful. Anyone?
So my husband said there's never been a microphone that I didn't like. So one of the things I'll say is that the first thing you have to do is you have to honor the culture, right? Like if it's a culture that believes in not having those conversations, like honor that. Don't come in like I do with my family and, strip them of everything that they know to be the case as a doula. And so one of the things I'll say is you can have the conversation over Thanksgiving. Or if people are not open, which you may find, the way that I have it, that I tell my clients, is to talk about people who have passed. How did that go? What did you think about that? You can sometimes get an answer indirectly, and I would just say the more you have the conversation, the better. So don't come in, again, like I do, ripping things apart because of my personality, but just softly have those conversations.
I'm a big fan of using what is in the media or movies. There's a movie, Still Alice, about a woman who goes through her cognitive decline in Alzheimer's. No matter what your belief is, we just had the loss of Pope Francis. What was in the media several weeks ago, months ago by now, about Gene Hackman. Someone mentioned First Ladies earlier. Jimmy Carter. Anyone know how long Jimmy Carter was on hospice for? 18 months. I actually should have led with how long do you think the average person stays on hospice, because it's... I'm sorry? Because she continued to meet criteria. While 50% usually pass within, back in my days 1 to 3 and 5 through 9, 40 to 50% of our clients would pass because they waited too long, and I will be more than happy to come back and talk about that. But things that are in the media I might use as a springboard for the conversation. And another tip that I've used with folks is kind of 3-part. Thank you for your time. I need your help, and I feel better about having this conversation. Obviously spaced out. Sir?
I wanted to offer an answer to the question first.
Okay.
And then take your question. Can I just offer my answer first? First of all, I'm the mother of teenage children, so I was thinking a lot about a different stage in life, but the advice they give for talking to your kids about sex is to talk early and often. And I think that advice applies here too. But what I really wanted to say was this. We're talking mostly about what to do in very extreme medical circumstances, which is, of course, important to plan for, and what to do when you die. But I think another way to enter these conversations is by talking about the legacy you want to leave behind to your families in terms of your family history, in terms of your life experience. And I think that if I were to, and I have approached these conversations with my own parents, one way of doing that is by saying, can I interview you about your life, the lessons that you've learned about your life? What do you know about your family tree and about the history of our family? Would you consider writing an ethical will, which is a will that leaves behind what you care about in terms of values and life lessons? It's not about money, it's not about medical decisions at the end of life. It's about your legacy, about what's important in this world. And so if I were to try to approach conversations about advance directive and other things, I might start with legacy about wisdom and values and family history. And as we're talking more about facing this stage of life, then to get into advance directives.
I just want to add one other thing before we take your question, is that I often frame it as it's really a gift to the people who you are really giving this huge responsibility to make this decision, and to give them the guidance that they know, so that, and writing it down, because it's really hard to make that decision. I had a social worker who I worked with for many, many years, and she was a huge proponent of advance directives, and we gave speeches and talks and, a million times. And when it happened to her father and she had to make those choices, she really struggled. And so being able to look back at that piece of paper and say, this is what he wanted, was enormously helpful. And the other thing is, it's not just about that end of life, that, turning off the switch, let's say. It's about a million other little things. I once was giving a presentation like this, and I was talking about instruction directives, and I had somebody come up to me and said, do you mean that I can tell my sons that I want them to pluck the chin hairs on and put makeup on me? 100%, because that was a huge dignity piece for her. So it's about more than just, whether or not we pull the plug. Well, I'm sorry, you wanted to ask a question. There are things that you have to do ahead of time, and you do have to pre-plan for that, but you can do it not only to medical schools, but also to body farms, where they do experimentation rather than just cutting up the corpse. I can do that.
I just want to add that
We'll collate some resources from you all, and then we can send them off.
that I lost a congregant last year, a young woman who died of a very rare kind of brain cancer, and she donated just tissue from her brain for research into that specific rare disease, and was still able to bury the rest of her body. So there really are a range of options.
And if I could just add to the conversation, not directly what you asked, but when you take your last breath, your body your power of attorney is no longer valid. Your body belongs to the next of kin. And so in New Jersey, again, and I'm going to ask Shanna just to talk about that, we fought for legislation that allows for you to choose someone to be, to make those decisions for your body. Am I correct?
Yeah, well, we actually mentioned that before.
Okay.
Funeral agent or disposition of someone who will handle the disposition of your remains, and that would be important in that situation. Yep.
I want to add something that nobody's asked about, but since you're talking about your body after you're no longer alive, in my tradition, the body itself, after you've died, is still very sacred. The body's not left alone until burial. When I was working as a chaplain in the Harlem Community Hospital with people of all different cultures and backgrounds, you could see that some families, after the person died, would really remain with the body, focused on being present with the person, and other people would get on their phones and call to make arrangements and do anything but really to be present with the body. I just encourage you at the moment of death, before death, after death, to remember that this is your loved one, and whatever your religious or cultural background, I just encourage you to either open yourself up to comfort with really being with them before, during, and after they die, or if that's something you're open to but you need someone to facilitate, to really look for a chaplain, a doula, or a social worker to help you be present at that time.
Thank you for that, Rabbi Julie.
That's a really great point. One of the things I educate my clients on is that whether you're on hospice or you're not on hospice, you don't have to call hospice right away. The funeral director does not have to show up within the hour, which they'll try to get you to do. And so sometimes what my job is to make sure that people are where they want to spend time with the body. Now, if hospice doesn't come, the person is not going to be pronounced dead until they arrive. And so, it's about education, right? And it is a sacred time. And I just want to share a quick story. I had a client once that was so empowered. The grandmother passed away in the middle of the night. It was a Friday night. And I even started to get a little nervous because hospice wasn't involved. So that meant that they had to call the non-emergency number. And it was 7 o'clock. And they were still singing and praying, and I was like, well, maybe, but when you have a desire, when you have a plan, it all worked itself out. And so I always tell people, when you do have to call the police to come in, that you want to tell them how you want them to arrive. You don't want the lights going, and you can say that person has been sick. The other thing I wanted to say is, I believe, and Shanna could probably correct me if I'm wrong, is that when you have hospice in the home, the police don't have to come in. I think Middlesex County is the only county where they still have to show up. And so that's another positive. You might want to limit those who, are in that space. And guess what? Just because we're talking about this and we're creating a serene situation, some people choose not to be there, or to get the body to be removed right away. And so again, the choice is yours.
Are there agencies that'll do that? Sometimes, yes, there are community-based organizations that the consumer can be connected with. So yes, how it relates necessarily to end of life, there's no clear-cut path that I could think of. But especially if they have a history of a hospitalization, long-term, say, the psychiatric hospitalization, are often connected with community-based organization and teams that check on the consumer.
Helen, since you opened the door, I'd love to speak about a mental health advance directive, which I think can be incredibly empowering. And there is a version online that's available. It is the New Jersey Mental Health Advance Directive, and it allows individuals with mental health diagnoses to provide information with regard to their wishes, and I'll give an example. So one of my children has a mental health diagnoses and has had very severe reaction to certain medication, and wants to make sure that she would never ever be exposed to that medication. So she's included that in her mental health advance directive, so that she knows that anyone who comes into contact with her if she might be in crisis would know not to give that medication. You can also specify who the professionals are in your life. You can also specify that you want the individual who makes mental health decisions for you to be able to agree to a voluntary commitment on your behalf, and the terms in which you might be willing to do that. So there's a lot of power in that document. I find it extraordinarily useful for individuals, for young adults. to be able to kind of control how their situation is dealt with, particularly if they might be someone who might face hospitalization for their mental health issues.
And just real quick, one of the things that when I said earlier is to build those relationships. And so you have care managers that you can, create care plans that they check in every so often, as well as attorneys. A lot of people are realizing that we can't do discipline solo. And so build those relationships. And if you need for someone to check in, whether it's mental or physical or safety, create those relationships before you need them.
Right. I think the point to what Adrian was mentioning earlier in Middlesex County was when you're on hospice, the nurse can actually do the pronouncement and go ahead and call that prearranged funeral home for you, so you skip that step. That's a great question. They're all great questions. This is what I love about the 5 Wishes document, because I think of it as the kinder, gentler advance directive legal. Yes, if it's signed by me and my 2 witnesses, one of whom, or both of whom, no one can be my named proxy. Do I have that right? But you could put those things in there. Do I want the candles? Do I want the prayer? Do I want the music? Or who I want to choose? Had my last child to 1 bourbon, 1 scotch, 1 beer. I want that played, perhaps, on my end of life journey. And if I'm not there to laugh, my children will certainly laugh. So yeah, I love that element of incorporating music. It's therapeutic. Some hospice programs will have a music therapist, and they're not performing. It's therapeutic, and they're engaging the clients. And it could be a wonderful cognitive memory stimulator as well.
We actually had the last coil, I think we gave out the 5 wishes.
Yeah.
So if anybody is interested in that document, we have, I don't have them with me right now, but just reach out to me and I can make sure you get that. It's called the 5 Wishes. Do you want Shannon to? Some people say it's not legal. I think they're legal.
It is legal. It's 5 Wishes is a document that incorporates both a healthcare proxy and an instruction directive, but it's much more encompassing than your traditional instruction directive, because it talks not just about the medical things that you would want, but other types of things like what you want the end of life to look like, music. Are there people who you do or do not want to be present? Do you want to be visited? Do you want someone to give prayers? It also says things that you might, if there are open issues that you want to address, things that you want to tell your family members. So it's a very broad document, and some people really like that, and some people think, yeah, that's too much. So it just depends on your individual. Yeah.
So I just have to say this is a free resource, and I can't think of the name of it, but if you Google it, it's a national organization where volunteers will come into your home and sing, or wherever you are, angelic songs for free. And they're always looking for volunteers, any singers in the room, but they will come out and sing around your bedside. And as a matter of fact, here in New Jersey, in northern New Jersey, they don't get enough people to tap into that. And so I have to put that on the table. The other thing I'll say is twice a month they have online singing, and it's absolutely beautiful. And so I think it's something like called Circle of Friends, but they'll come out to you and sing for free.
That's great.
Just a silly question, but I filled out the 5 Wishes document, but I thought it was like nobody in my family could sign it, and then I got embarrassed about who to ask to sign this thing. Is it right that family members cannot sign it?
You can't have as witness the people who you have named as your proxy. So if, it could be other family members, but it can't be the people who are named as your proxy, and I wouldn't have your successor as well. And it's 2 witnesses and a notary.
Any other questions? Yeah, so just reach out to me after this program, and I'll take your information, and then I'll make sure you get a copy of the 5 Wishes. Did you have a question?
I did. I thought I had read on some of the forms, if you have two witnesses, you don't need a notary, that's why we acted like that.
You can do either or. I recommend doing both, but you can do either or.
All right, I think we're done. I just want to thank everybody for coming and thank our esteemed